Welcome to day number 2 of our book club on Rising Strong by Brene Brown. If you're reading this with me, I hope that you are being as challenged and inspired as I am with this. It's been so good. If you missed my post on MoneySavingMom.com that I did last night, be sure to read it. It was my thoughts on the first 2 chapters. Hi, Christy, welcome back. And we are going to be doing chapters 3 and 4 today. And I love that. Hey, Joy. I am just loving this book, Rising Strong. I mentioned that I've read the 3 other books that Brene has written, and all of them have messed with me in such a good way, but I feel like this book might just be the one that messes with me the most. So in chapters 3 and 4, the thing that really stuck out to me was about story. And before I read this book and started reading this book, I read an article that Brene did. I don't know, I found it somewhere on Facebook, and it was on story and talking about how the story that she shared about her husband, and she and her husband, how they'd gone out to this lake and they were swimming across the lake, and they had this real big misunderstanding that usually would turn into this huge fight that then they wouldn't be talking to each other for 3 days. And it all started with this small thing. Thank you so much for saying that. And what is your name? I should know that, and I don't. I keep seeing you comment. Thank you so much. And so she talked about how this simple thing that had happened, how they miss Emily. Okay, Emily, thanks so much for joining us. This simple thing that had happened where they were swimming across the lake, and she made a comment about how wonderful it was, and her husband kind of said, just kind of blew it off, and she felt like she was just sharing this kind of intimate moment with him about how wonderful it was, and he was blowing her off. And she started then just turning it into this big thing of like, maybe it's because he doesn't like me in my swimsuit anymore. Yes, I know I've gained some weight. And she's turning it into this big story that wasn't true. And she said she would have normally just blown that story up and let it dictate how she treated her husband for the next few days or few weeks or a very long time. And she said, but instead she chose to really talk to him. And she used these words. She said, the story that I'm hearing in my head, or the story that I'm telling myself, or something like that, something to that effect. That really caught my attention, because I am really good at making up stories that aren't true, but might appear to be based upon one little thing that someone does. And then I make up a big story. And then I look for, facts that would confirm that that's true. And so maybe then they do something else that then I think that's right. And then something else happens, and then someone else tells me, and on and on and on, until I blow it up into this big story without ever even fact checking. So I loved how she went to her husband and she said, the story that I'm telling myself is. And then she explained to him how she was feeling like she's inadequate. Maybe he doesn't love her anymore. Maybe, he thinks that she's lost, because she gained weight, then she wasn't pretty anymore, and on and on. And that was not the case at all. He'd had this dream about the kids drowning, and it was coming back to him. So in the water, all he could think about was the kids and the drowning and protecting his family. And his brain was anywhere near the story that she had come up with. But had she not gone to him and said, the story that I'm telling myself is, she would have never known. So that really challenged me. And I've actually used that in 3 situations recently. One was with my husband. It was a misunderstanding, and I started believing this big thing. And I went to him and I said, you know what? The story that I'm telling myself right now is X. And I explained to him. He's like, that's not true at all. And we were able to nip that right in the bud. The same thing with another friend of mine and another business situation. I realized that I was telling myself a story that I didn't know whether it was true. and I went to the source and I fact checked. And in every case, it wasn't true. So this is a really, really key takeaway that I know that is I'm going to carry with me for hopefully the rest of my life. To stop telling myself stories and to start finding the truth and fact checking instead of blowing it up into this big thing and causing, this is how relationships are ruined. This is how bridges are burned because of these stories. I loved from chapter 4, she says, do we want to write the story or do we want to hand that power over to someone else? Choosing to write our own story means getting uncomfortable. It's choosing courage over comfort. So she takes kind of that story example and then she takes it even further. And I think she's going to really in the next few chapters talk about how do we choose to write our own story in the sense of not only do we get the story correct and not just write the story that isn't true at all, but how do we then not let other people handing that power over to someone else? So do we want to write the story or do we want to hand that power over to someone else? One of the truisms of wholehearted living is you either walk into your story and own your truth, or you live outside of your story hustling for worthiness. I spent a long time of my life hustling for worthiness. I thought if I would just try harder, do more, be better, then other people would like me. And somehow if other people would like me, then that would make me likable. I gave the power to other people to write my story instead of saying, I am enough. I am enough in Christ. And that is the end. Case closed. I don't need other people's affirmation to know the truth. That has changed my life. Instead of waiting for other people to affirm me in a way that was unhealthy, instead of chasing after that, knowing the truth in my heart and then living out of that truth. That's changed my life. So I want to challenge you today to make sure that the stories in your head, that you fact check them, for one, and for two, to not let other people write your story or to think that you have to wait on them to write your story, but instead to know the truth in your heart and to walk out of that truth. That will change your life. So that's from chapters 3 and 4 of Rising Strong, and I will have a new post up on Money Saving Mom where I'll share some more quotes and just how this is challenging me. And if you would like to join in, I'd love for you to. Tomorrow I will be scoping and blogging on chapters 5 and 6. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. And if you missed my earlier scope, I talked about how at 3 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, I will be doing a scope on Money Making Mom, my new book, and I'll be talking about how to make money blogging and specifically through advertising. So if you're interested in that, I'd love for you to join us. Thanks so much and have a great day.